Hello friends, this is the third lecture of the insulin series. In this lecture, we will be discussing about diabetic ketoacidosis, hyperosmolar non-ketotic diabetic coma, Sumogai phenomenon and Dawn phenomenon. So first coming to diabetic ketoacidosis, it is the most important complication. It is the most important complication of type 1 diabetes. And it may be the initial manifestation of this type 1 diabetes. It is rare in type 2 diabetes mellitus. What are the precipitating factors of this decay? The precipitating factors are too little or no insulin intake, infections, severe stress, and drugs like thiazides or corticosteroid. Now coming to the pathogenesis of diabetic ketoacidosis. First and foremost thing is, it is because of insulin deficiency or glucagon excess. So insulin deficiency causes the activation of lipolysis in the adipose tissue, and it increases the plasma free fatty acid concentration, which leads to the further hepatic free fatty acid concentration increase. Also, insulin deficiency or glucagon excess can result in hyperglycemia. This hyperglycemia causes osmotic diuresis and causes volume depletion and dehydration. Also, the glucagon excess causes activation of carnitine acetyltransferase that causes accelerated ketogenesis, and this accelerated ketogenesis cause uses of the bicarbonate, leading to bicarbonate depletion. So this is the pathogenesis of diabetic ketoacidosis. Now coming to the clinical features of diabetic ketoacidosis. It begins with anorexia, nausea, vomiting, and increased rate of urine formation. Abdominal pain, is a dominant symptom. Apart from this, Kussmaul's respiration, that is rapid or drip breathing, is seen, and fruity odor of breath due to acetone is there. And signs of volume depletion and dehydration are invariably present. Now coming to the laboratory findings. First is hyperglycemia. Second is increase blood ketone bodies. Third is increase in anion gap, metabolic acidosis, and hyperkalemia. One thing we have to remember over here is, though there is hyperkalemia, but there is depleted intracellular potassium levels. Due to transcellular shift. And this is because of decreased insulin. Now coming to the treatment. What are the treatments? Insulin, that is regular insulin given IV, then IV fluids, then potassium replacement, and sodium bicarbonate, and other antibiotics and supportive measures. We'll discuss it one by one. So first, coming to the insulin therapy. Regular insulin should be given. Preferably it should be given intravenous at a bolus dose of 0.1 to 0.2 unit per kg IV. It is followed by dose of 0.1 unit per kg per hour infusion, and the rate of infusion is doubled. Rate of infusion doubled if no significant fall in blood glucose within 2 hours. Okay, so the bolus dose is 0.1 to 0.2 unit per kg IV, followed by 0.1 unit per kg per hour infusion, and this rate of infusion is doubled if there is no significant fall in blood glucose within 2 hours. And when the blood glucose reaches 300 milligram per deciliter, blood glucose reaches 300 milligram per deciliter, the rate of infusion is reduced. To 2 to 3 units per hour. This is maintained till the patient becomes conscious and routine therapy with subcutaneous insulin is instituted. Till patient becomes conscious and routine therapy with subcutaneous insulin is instituted. So once again I am going to repeat. The regular insulin is given at a bolus dose of 0.1 to 0.2 unit per kg IV, followed by 0.1 unit per kg per hour infusion, and the rate of infusion is doubled if no significant fall in blood glucose is there within 2 hours, and blood glucose when it reaches 300 milligram per deciliter, the rate of infusion is reduced to 2 to 3 unit per hour, and it is continued till the patient becomes conscious, and routine therapy is instituted with subcutaneous insulin. Now coming to the IV fluids. One to 2 liters of IV fluid in the form of isotonic saline is given rapid intravenously on admission. Then we can switch to 0.45% sodium chloride after the initial bolus. If the serum sodium is high or normal. When the plasma blood glucose falls below 250 milligram per deciliter, when the plasma blood glucose falls less than 250 milligram per deciliter, then 5% glucose should be given, because the blood glucose falls, then this blood glucose falls before the ketone bodies are fully cleared from the circulation. Also, this glucose is required to restore the hepatic glycogen. The fourth point is potassium replacement. When insulin therapy is instituted, ketosis subsides and the potassium is driven back intracellularly. And this causes dangerous hypokalemia. So at this stage, that is approximately 2 to 3 hours after insulin administration, potassium should be given in the form of potassium chloride. It should be given at a dose of 10 to 20 milliequivalent per hour, that is added to the IV fluid. Apart from this, sodium bicarbonate, this is not routinely required. And can be given only if there is more of metabolic acidosis. And apart from this, antibiotics and treatment of the precipitating causes is given. So the broad headings, once again I am telling. Treatment is insulin, regular insulin, IV fluid. First you can start with isotonic saline, and that too 1 to 2 liter rapid intravenous on administration. Then you can switch over to 0.45% NaCl after the initial bolus if the serum sodium is high or normal, Then when the blood glucose becomes less than 250 milligram per deciliter, we have to add 5% glucose. This is to restore the hepatic glycogen, and also because the blood glucose falls before the ketone bodies are fully cleared of the circulation. Then next, potassium replacement. Insulin, when it is given, it drives the potassium back intracellularly, then this causes hypokalemia. So approximately 2 to 3 hours after the insulin administration, potassium chloride can be given at a dose of 10 to 20 milliequivalent per hour with the IV fluid, and sodium bicarbonate is not routinely required, and antibiotics and other treatment of the precipitating causes is given. Now coming to the other important part, that is hyperosmolar non-ketotic hyperglycemic coma. Non-ketotic hyperglycemic coma. It is characterized by high blood glucose which is above 600 milligram per deciliter, and serum osmolality greater than 320 milliosmol per liter, along with deteriorating mental status, and this generally occurs with elderly type 2 diabetes. Then the treatment of this hyperosmolar non-ketotic diabetic coma is, the treatment principles are same. The general principles are same as that of DKA, except a few points, that is faster insulin therapy, and replacement, insulin requirement is lower, less potassium replacement is required. And the patients are prone to thrombosis, prophylactic, so therefore prophylactic heparin therapy is recommended. Heparin therapy in the form of prophylaxis is recommended. Okay. General principles are same as that of DKA, except the faster insulin therapy and replacement is required. Insulin requirement is much lower, less potassium replacement is required, and heparin therapy prophylactically is recommended. Now coming to two phenomenon, that is Somogai phenomenon and Dawn phenomenon. So Somogai phenomenon, this is also known as post hypoglycemic hyperglycemia. That is the rebound hyperglycemia following an episode of hypoglycemia. There is a rebound hyperglycemia following a episode of hypoglycemia, and this is due to the counter regulatory hormones. So if the insulin dose of a particular patient is high, then what happens? There will be hypoglycemia, early morning hypoglycemia. At that time, the counter regulatory hormone release will be there, and that causes hyperglycemia. So the significance of Somogai phenomenon is that the correction of morning hyperglycemia is decreasing the evening dose of insulin. Then what is the dawn phenomenon? This is hyperglycemia caused by normal surge of growth hormone early in the morning. And the treatment here is increase the evening insulin dose. So this completes the insulin lecture series. Thank you.